He walked into a diner. Just a man. Hungry. Tired. Done with a long drive. He sat down. Ordered coffee. Minded his business. Then the door swung open. A sheriff walked in. Chest puffed. Badge catching the light. The whole room shifted. You know that shift. That cold, quiet shift when everyone suddenly pretends to look at their plates. The sheriff didn't look around the room. He looked straight at one person. He walked right up to the man, pulled out handcuffs. And in front of every single person in that diner, in front of the families, the waitresses, the little kids eating pancakes, he snapped those cuffs on him. My town, the sheriff said. My rules. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. Because in a small town where the sheriff is the law, what are you going to do? Here's what nobody in that diner could have known. Not the sheriff, not the stunned customers, not even the waitress, who was about to drop every single plate she was carrying. The man in those handcuffs? He wasn't just a man passing through. When the truth came out, nothing in that town would ever be the same. Marcus Webb was 43 years old. He had spent the last 22 years proving himself, not to his family, not to his friends, to strangers, every single day. He grew up in Baltimore, one of 5 kids, in a row house, where the heat sometimes cut out in January. And his mother worked doubles at the hospital to make sure they all had enough. Marcus wasn't the loudest kid. He wasn't the flashiest, but he was the one who stayed up reading after everyone else was asleep. Law books, case files, criminal justice textbooks borrowed from the public library. He was the one who looked at the world and thought, this doesn't have to be this way. Somebody has to fix it. Why not me? He went to Howard University on a partial scholarship and a whole lot of student loans. Graduated with honors. Then the academy. Then 15 years on the force in Philadelphia. Homicide division. Decorated. Respected. A detective who could read a crime scene the way most people read a newspaper. And then, 3 months ago, Marcus got promoted. Not promoted within Philadelphia. Promoted out of it. He was now a deputy chief of the Federal Criminal Investigation Division. A badge that didn't just mean authority in one city. It meant authority everywhere. A badge that very few people in the country ever earned. And a badge that, on this particular Tuesday afternoon, he had tucked into his jacket pocket because he was off duty, road-weary, and all he wanted, all he needed, was a cup of hot coffee and a plate of eggs. So he stopped at Millhaven. Millhaven, population 3,000, and dropping. The kind of town that time forgot, and nostalgia invented. It had one diner, Patsy's Place, with red vinyl booths and a pie case that spun slowly near the register, and a laminated menu that hadn't changed since 1987. Marcus pulled in off Route 9 at 2:17 in the afternoon. He was dressed in civilian clothes, dark jeans, a plain gray pullover, boots. Nothing about him screamed federal law enforcement. Nothing about him was meant to. He was on his own time. He chose a stool at the counter, set his car keys down, and nodded to the waitress, a woman in her 50s named Denise, with reading glasses on a chain, and a coffee pot that seemed permanently grafted to her right hand. Just coffee to start, Marcus said. And whatever the special is, Denise smiled. Meatloaf today, hun. It's good. Sold, said Marcus. What Marcus didn't know was that 3 stools down, a man had already pulled out his phone. And what nobody in Patsy's Place knew, not Denise, not the couple sharing a slice of coconut cream pie near the window, not the trucker on his 3rd cup, was that the man making that call was dialing directly to Sheriff Dale Pruitt. And Sheriff Dale Pruitt had a way of doing things in Millhaven. His way. The only way. And then, the door opened. Sheriff Dale Pruitt was 61 years old, and had worn a badge in Millhaven for 27 of those years. Broad through the shoulders, silver hair cut military short, a mustache that meant business. He walked into Patsy's Place the way a man walks into a room he owns. Because in his mind, he did. His eyes swept the diner once. They landed on Marcus. That was it. One sweep, one landing, decision made. Pruitt crossed the floor in 8 steps. Marcus heard the boots, felt the presence, and turned slowly on his stool. "Afternoon," Marcus said. Neutral. Calm. The calm of a man who had been in situations far more dangerous than this, and knew that calm was the only tool that never ran out. Pruitt didn't return the greeting. "I'm going to need you to stand up," Pruitt said. Low voice. Controlled. The voice of a man who expected no resistance. Marcus set down his coffee mug. "Is there a problem, officer?" "Sheriff," Pruitt corrected. "And yes, there is. We've had a report of a suspicious individual in the area. I need to see some ID." The diner had gone silent. Denise stood frozen at the far end of the counter, coffee pot mid-air. Marcus looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, quietly, "I don't believe I'm required to provide identification without being told what I've done wrong, Sheriff." Pruitt's jaw tightened. 1 beat. 2 beats. "Stand up," he said again. Harder this time. "And this, right here, is the moment you need to understand. Because Marcus Webb had a choice. He was a federal officer. He could have produced his badge right then and there. He could have ended this in 10 seconds. But Marcus was also a man who knew exactly what was happening. He had seen it. He had studied it. He had testified about it in federal hearings. And a part of him, the part that had spent 22 years proving himself to strangers, needed to see it play out. Needed to document it. Not for revenge. For truth. Marcus stood up. Slowly. Hands visible. The way you learn to do when the badge isn't out. And Sheriff Pruitt pulled out handcuffs. "You're being detained," Pruitt said. "Pending investigation of suspicious activity." The click of the cuffs was the loudest sound in the room. A woman in the corner booth covered her mouth. The trucker set down his cup. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, grabbed her father's arm and stared. Denise finally moved. She stepped forward, coffee pot still in hand, and said carefully, "Dale, he ain't done nothing." He sat down and ordered the special, same as anyone. Pruitt shot her one look. She stopped. He walked Marcus toward a booth near the window. Not out the door, not to a patrol car, just kept him there, on display, in handcuffs, in front of everyone. "You want to tell me what you're doing in Millhaven?" Pruitt asked, settling into the seat across from him like this was casual, like this was nothing. "Passing through," Marcus said. "From where?" "Philadelphia. Long way from home." "That's usually how passing through works," Marcus said. And then Pruitt leaned in. "Listen, I don't know how things work where you come from, but in Millhaven, I keep the peace my way. You come into my town looking out of place. People get nervous. People call me. And I respond. That's how it works here. My town. My rules." He said it like a slogan, like he'd said it 100 times. And maybe he had. Marcus nodded slowly. Then he said, "I'd like to make a phone call." Pruitt shrugged. "Suit yourself." Marcus reached carefully into his jacket pocket, movements deliberate, slow, visible, and pulled out his phone. He dialed a number, put it on speaker. It rang twice. Then a voice answered. "Deputy Chief Webb, I've been trying to reach you. We have the confirmation from the DOJ briefing. You're clear for," Marcus said, clearly and calmly. "I'm going to need you to hold on. I'm currently being detained in Millhaven. Sheriff's Department." A long pause on the line. Then, "I'm sorry, detained? By whom?" Pruitt's face changed. It was subtle, a flicker, but Denise saw it. The trucker saw it. The woman in the booth saw it. Something moved behind his eyes. Not yet fear, but the first cousin of it. Marcus looked directly at Pruitt and said, "By a man who just told me it's his town and his rules." Another pause. Then the voice on the phone said 3 words that made the color drain from Dale Pruitt's face. "We'll call the director." What happened next took 11 minutes. 11 minutes that felt like 11 years to every single person in that diner. 2 calls came into Pruitt's radio in quick succession. The first was from the Millhaven dispatch office. The second was from the state police commander, direct line. A call that Pruitt later described as the most uncomfortable conversation of his career. The third, and this is the one that mattered, citration, came from a number that made Pruitt stand up so fast, He knocked his own coffee mug off the table. The deputy director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Denise saw it happen in real time. She said later that she had never in 26 years of working that counter seen Dale Pruitt's hand shake. But it shook. She watched it shake as he pressed the radio to his ear, watched his face go from red to white, to something she didn't have a word for. He looked across the table at Marcus Webb, still sitting there, calm as still water, hands cuffed in front of him, and said nothing for what felt like forever. Then he said, I'm going to remove the restraints. Marcus didn't react, didn't smile, didn't gloat. He just waited while Pruitt unlocked the cuffs with hands that were no longer steady. Denise was the one who moved first. She walked the length of the counter, refilled Marcus's coffee, the coffee that had gone cold, and set a piece of coconut cream pie next to it. Didn't say a word. Didn't need to. The little girl from the corner booth walked up to the counter and climbed onto the stool next to Marcus. Her father started to pull her back. Marcus shook his head gently. Let her stay. Are you a good guy or a bad guy? The little girl asked. Marcus looked at her for a moment, really looked at her, and said, I try to be a good guy. I don't always get it right, but I try. She nodded like that was the most sensible thing anyone had ever said to her. Then she stole a bite of his pie. Pruitt left the diner without another word. The formal inquiry began within 48 hours. The DOJ opened a review of his department's detention practices. A pattern emerged. 37 similar stops over 6 years, almost all targeting men of color passing through Millhaven on Route 9. Marcus Webb never sought the spotlight. He filed his report. He testified, and then he drove back to his life. But Millhaven was never the same, because the truth, once it walks through the door and sits down at the counter, it doesn't leave just because someone wants it to. After everything Marcus Webb went through in that diner, the cuffs, the stares, the silence of people who knew something was wrong and didn't speak, he still chose dignity. He still chose calm. He still chose to let the truth do the work. That takes a kind of strength most of us will never be tested on. So here's what I want to know, and I want you to be honest in the comments. If you had been in that diner and you saw what happened, what would you have done? Would you have spoken up? Or would you have looked down at your plate? There's no wrong answer, but there might be an honest one. If stories like this one matter to you, stories about real people, real moments, real courage, then hit subscribe. Because we find these stories, we tell them right, and we don't stop. Next up, a nurse gets fired for breaking hospital policy. Then she saves a life, doing exactly what got her fired. That one will stay with you. Until next time, stay human.